today is completely extemporaneous. Rosemary and I haven't talked about what we would do. What we want to do is just have a lot of joy together.
How many news do we ever prepare?
U.S. News and World Report.
You know I hate extemporaneous.
So we really, you should go back down for food when you want. What I thought I would do is just take a few minutes to tell you the story through my eyes, and then I thought it might be fun just to come up through the years to hear a memory from some of you that choose to give one. Just going year by year, and then we'll just let the day unfold with us in little conversations. It's interesting. I've told the story of you folks again and again here at NYU. Nancy was saying how she's run into people associated with NYU, and whenever it's come out that she was a debater, that it was, oh, I know all about you folks, because I find it impossible to explain myself to people without talking about you folks. And I think that that's the major thing I'd like to say to you. I have said publicly, many, many times, both during my time as dean of the law school, and many of you don't know about legal education, but I was dean of NYU's law school for 14 years, and it was a good run. It was a good run. It was a time of transformation in NYU law school. And some people credit me with being an important part of that, and have been very kind to me, writing the histories of legal education. And now at NYU, of course, as its president, I'm frequently given credit for things that go on in the university, sometimes rightly, most of the time, simply because I'm there. I've always said publicly that the single most important thing that I would have done in my teaching life was the 15 years work. I say it to the students here at NYU to try to motivate them to find something that's their passion and to follow it. And I really believe that. I don't think I don't think that there could be something that would be personally as formative as those years were for me. Everything I'm doing at NYU, everything I did at NYU Law School was simply an extrapolation of the society. It's amazing to me that people found things that we did together just by instinct, and more than you realize, under the inspiration of a man that many of you didn't know, but a man that I revere to this day and cherish to this day, a man named Charlie Winans at Brooklyn Prep, who I will visit later today. I mean, I visit him every Sunday. I've persuaded the Jesuits, even though he wasn't a Jesuit, to take him into their senior campus on the port. And I go up there at least once a week to visit with him, because I realized that what I did with you was in large part simply an extrapolation of what Charlie had done with me. And what I'm doing at NYU and what I did at the law school is nothing more than bringing into a world where notions like the society or team or whatever it was we did, play another octave of the piano. If we haven't had Chinese food, let's go have Chinese food. If we haven't been to Tanglewood, let's get to Tanglewood. If we haven't seen the Grand Canyon, let's get to the Grand Canyon. But whatever it was, that's been just a simple truism for me. And it's startling to me that people find that miraculous in the great educational institutions. So I want you to know, when I arrived at St. Brendan's, I don't know how you people visualized me, but I was very young, and I was very,
in hindsight, very, very young.
Yes. So I'm going to just take 5 minutes and tell you the story the way I tell it to people. And What I want you to understand is that I have a very, very deep appreciation for the fact that I used to say to the people at the law school, my professors at the law school, that they were much too concerned with fact and not enough with truth. And that frequently the great truths are not factual. Most of the great things we know are, we don't know cognitively, we know them experientially. I know that I love Lisa and vice versa, not because we reasoned each other to it. And I know I love each of you, not because of anything we reasoned. It's just something that we experienced. So I'm not presenting what I'm about to say as 100% factual. I'm presenting it, you know, and I think, I'm sure it's not. You know, and I could go through, I could give a very long version and go through each epicycle with each one of you, but it's true as I experience it. And it's so part, honey, you can leave whatever. I don't want you to feel captured.
John, do you want to be here?
No,
Okay.
I don't know where I want to be, except, no, I'm very comfortable here. So, the first thing I want to say is a variation on what I just said a moment ago about how formative those 15 years were. There's no question that you people shaped me and gave me much more than I shaped you and gave to you. I hope that each of you, I sense that each of you feels that something good happened, net. But I know something wonderful happened to me because of you. Now, I usually start by saying, so I was the National High School debate champion, and I was very young. When I graduated from high school, I was 16. And I arrived at Fordham. I had been cherry-picked by a man named Timothy Healy, who went on to become the great president of Georgetown and made the modern Georgetown. Tim Healy was a great educator. He came back here to New York and he ran the New York Public Library. And he died at a very young age. He was a hard-driven person. He smoked. He always had a glass of scotch in his hands. He was a classic leader. And Tim Healy had cherry-picked 6 of us to be part of an honors program at Fordham. And we were supposed to take Fordham out of the Catholic ghetto in the 50s. We were supposed to get Rhodes scholarships and become leaders. And I was, in some ways, the star of the group. I had arrived late because I had planned to go into the Jesuits. I planned to go into the Jesuits, by the way. I don't think any of you know this story, and you'll excuse me if this is kind of a rambling of an old man. I planned to go into the Jesuits because I had committed a category error. You know what the logicians call a category error. I had concluded somewhere around the 7th or 8th grade that if you didn't know how to dance, you couldn't date. and being a syllogistic, cognitive kid, since I didn't know how to dance, I couldn't date.
You just told me.
You know. Now, fortunately, I was in the world. I was in the world of debate, and so there was a co-ed.
Nobody can dance. Nobody can dance.
So it was a co-ed world, and I had friends who were young women. And I remember where I was in our house in Rockaway in November of 1958, my senior year of high school, when the phone rang, and it was Ellen Winters, the second affirmative from D. Mary Lewis Academy, who was a friend of mine. And Ellen said, because I had concluded by this time, moving into my senior year, that since I was never going to date, I might as well become a Jesuit. So the kind of syllogism flowed, you know. And everybody knew I was going to be a Jesuit. And even though I had a crush on not Ellen Winters, but a young debater at Mary Lewis called Elaine, even though I had a crush on her, I knew I couldn't do anything about it because I couldn't date. Therefore, there was no sense in telling Elaine that I had a crush on her. So Ellen called, and she said, "You know, John, I know nothing can come of this, but nonetheless, I'd be very pleased if you would accompany me to the Mary Lewis prom." So here there was this clash for me. Was I going to hurt a person that I cared about? Or was I going to humiliate myself by going on a date, not being able to dance? And I said, yes, I'll go with you. And I walked into the living room where my sister, Mary Adrian, was. And I said, sis, I've just accepted that I'm going to go to the Mary Lewis prom in a month. And the reason I haven't been dating is I don't know how to dance. And she said what Pat said. She said, well, why didn't you tell me? And she proceeded to teach me how to dance. And by the time the Mary Lewis prom came, I could do what has become known as my irresistible and ironic slow dance with a very, very provocative hip movement. And I could do a cha-cha at that point without counting out loud. I couldn't talk at cha-cha. And I could do a Lindy, which to this day I can only do with my sister. And I could do with Elaine if she were here, but even Lisa kind of collapsed and lay out. And Katie refuses to be seen with me. And Kathy, I don't think you could ever do it either.
How about you?
So there you are, you know. So I got to the Mary Lewis prom, and in December, and discovered that none of the guys could dance. And I was the best dancer in the crowd. And there went the Jesuits, you know, and I got interested in Elaine. And so I moved up to Fordham in my freshman year as a latecomer to Tim Healy's honors program because I hadn't applied to any colleges. And the headmaster of Brooklyn Prep had just written a letter, and I'd gone up to Fordham, and all of a sudden I was in Healy's honors program, and I was the star of the show. And I was going to become a Rhodes Scholar. And my father died my freshman year in college. And then I cannot explain what prompted me to do this. But one day I just got on the subway. Now I had been a very entrepreneurial kid. I don't know if you remember the beach business. So I had saved, even though my family was very poor, I had saved a lot of money. And I bought a little van. And I had a driver's ed license. And I went out to St. Brendan's. And I didn't even have the grace to find out the name of the principal. I knew from my sister that the principal had kept a scrapbook on my debate because she would call my sister in and she would say, your brother, you know, you should have to see in the tablet or whatever your brother just wanted to me. So I rang the door of the convent and I asked to see the principal. And I didn't know that the principal that had kept the scrapbook had left, and a new principal by the name of Sister John Berkman had arrived. And I walked in, and Sister John Berkman was there, and Pat's going to laugh again, because with her was this very saccharine woman by the name of Sister Maria Dolorosa. Sister Maria Dolorosa. And I said, here I was 17, and I said, look, sisters, I want to start high school. Julia, hello, honey. This is our other granddaughter, Julia. Say hello. Say hello, everybody.
Hi, Julia.
Do you want to go to Grandma? Yeah. So Grandpa's telling a story. I'm sorry that this is going so. So I said, look, sister, you don't have to worry about anything. I said, I'm going to start a team, and I've got the money, or we'll raise the money to pay for everything. And I got this little bus. I'm going to drive to tournaments, and I promise you that if you let me do this, the girls will learn a lot, and they'll win the national championship, and they'll get scholarships to college, and you'll be proud of me. And to this day, I can't explain to you why I was moved to do that. You know, what it was, why I didn't. I mean, the natural thing would have been for me to debate with my roommates who were debaters. You know, you remember Denny Roberts and Jim English, and some of the later folks won't remember, yeah. Well, Brian Griffin was always there from Brooklyn Prep. But in any case, she said, I'll call an assembly and we'll see what happens. And that was the beginning of the society. And by the end of our first year of the society, what you probably don't know is that, first of all, Elaine was enormously jealous, and that caused that we had dated for 2 years, and that caused the end of that, because she essentially said you have to choose between the debate team and me, and I said, I'm going to stick with the debate team. And the second thing was that essentially I didn't go to college. I mean, Tim Healy threw me out of the honors program and took away my scholarship. Fortunately, I had a Regents scholarship and a National Merit Scholarship, so I could still go to college. But Jed, when he went to college, took my college transcript with him. I'm sure Katie will too, because I graduated with about a 2.1 grade point in college, because I was never in class, and the Jesuits took that very seriously. And then I remember, because I always wanted to go to law school. I knew I would go to law school. I always wanted to go to law school. And Tim Healy stopped me on the quadrangle in my senior year in May. And he said to me, his opening words, I remember as if it were yesterday, were, you've been a big disappointment to us. And he said, but the Vatican Council has happened, and it's going to be important for lay Catholics to understand other religions. And we'll give you a second chance, we'll give you a fellowship. So I needed a way to support myself. And they were going to pay me to go to school. So, and I thought that would keep my mother at bay. My mother was really against my involvement in St. Martin's. She saw my own career unravel. She wanted me to get a Rhodes Scholarship and become a lawyer. In fact, it's interesting because my dad's law firm was being held for me, and my dad's law firm is the antecedent of the law firm that was George Pataki's law firm. In fact, George Pataki's best friend and general counsel, I always forget the guy's name, but he's always saying what a great friend he is of mine, because Pataki's best friend and closest advisor, who's not in the government himself, got the slot that I was being saved for me. So there's a way in which I could kind of extrapolate what would have happened, you know, if I hadn't, I mean, Lord knows. Wouldn't it be horrible if I would have been a Republican? Yeah. Well, Pataki would have been a Democrat. One or the other. But, so, I felt very honored that Tim Healy stopped me on the quadrangle and he said, you can have this scholarship. You know, so he said, when I got to the program in September, and there were only 2 of us there, I realized that he didn't have any students for this program, and he was looking for somebody who probably didn't have any plans. But the PhD in religion, or starting the PhD in religion, at least kept my mother at bay. She couldn't complain about my studying religion. And as you know, I got that, and then I started. I was. It was very, very fashionable to have lay theologians in Catholic colleges in the mid-'60s. So since I was the first lay PhD, I was a very hot property. But I chose to go to St. Francis College in Brooklyn because that gave me the flexibility to keep working with the society, which was the driving force in my life. And I think that there's no question that this was the kind of, everything was ordered around that. So then finally, in 1972, I turned 30. And
I don't.
what? Say?
Nothing, I'm doing the math.
Yeah.
I'm keeping you honest.
Yeah. I turned 30. I was born on September 29, 1942, right? So I turned 30, and Bob Shrum, we used to go down to the Georgetown Debate Institute with Jimmy Unger and Bob Shrum and Larry Tribe, Mike Naylor. Brian by then had died in the fire, those of you that remember Brian. I remember where we were. We were together in my Ocean Parkway apartment when we heard that announcement on the radio. Some of us were hearing through. It's one of them. So Shrum and Naylor and Tribe sat me down I can tell you where the benches on the Georgetown campus, and they said, you know, you've got to get to law school. You've always wanted to go to law school. And you can't continue with the society forever. So I applied to law school. I applied to 5 law schools, 4 in New York, Brooklyn, Fordham, Columbia, and NYU, and I applied to Harvard because Larry was there as a recently tenured faculty member. And I was denied by all 5, to which I replied. I mean, rightly so, right? I had a 2.1 grade point average in college. I had a perfect LSAT score. I had this PhD in religion. I was a tenured. I mean, think about this. To view through the eyes of admissions, PhD in religion, I'm leaving a tenured. I was chairman of the department. Why is he abandoning his discipline? There's got to be something that happened there. And then this preposterous story about this girls' debating team that nobody could understand. And Bob and Larry went into a woman named Molly Garrity, her name was. She was the dean of admissions at Harvard, and said to her, "You misread this. Larry claims he threatened to resign if they didn't accept me. There's some evidence for that I found out later on." And Molly Garrity called me up and said, "You've been accepted on reconsideration." And I said, "I can't come." And she said, "What do you mean you can't come?" And I said, "Well, if I'm going to go to Harvard," I said, "I've never really gone to school in my life." I said, "I really stopped my education at the 10th grade." And there's a way, you know, I said that, Lisa says, I can say this to you people, because you'll understand it, but I once said it to a dean here at NYU. And Lisa said, "Never say that to somebody at NYU." But I want to say this to you honestly, because it will explain to you the importance of what we did. I mean, there's a spiritual level at which you shaped and formed my values about education. And there's a way in which you taught me the single most important thing that drives everything I do as a teacher. And I am a very, very good, very successful teacher. And that is that the most important thing that happens in the classroom is the expectation set by the teacher. Because there's a way in which we set preposterous goals for ourselves. And where it came from in me or in you, I don't know. but we just wouldn't accept any limits on what we would do. And, you know, there were times, look, I realize there are times when we pushed too hard for those goals. You know, but I don't know if we would have achieved it if we didn't push that hard. And you people did amazing things. I mean, you dominated high school debate for those 15 years. And more than that, you became the people that you are. Anyway, to come back to the text. So I said to Molly Garrity, I can't, oh, I'm sorry, I know what I was about to say. So I said to this dean here, I said, you know, because he was very complimentary to me, because apparently I think about things in ways that are not usual for deans or for presidents of universities. Now, I have no way of knowing that, of course, because it seems perfectly normal to me, right? Because I have no frame of reference, and I'm not particularly well read. I mean, this is again something I can say here in the family. I mean, people assume that I've read all, you know, of the Western Canon, for example. I never had time to read the Western Canon. I'm a very slow reader, and I was too busy reading whatever there was to read on the debate topic that year. And you know, so you know, they assume that I've read, you know, this stuff. And when I once said to this fellow George Downs, who was a Princeton, you know, dean and moved to NYU as dean of social science, and I said, you know, George, he said, you're amazing. You always think out of the box. And I said, George, I stopped my education in the 10th grade. And I said, from the 10th grade on, essentially, I wrote 19 doctoral dissertations, 18 debate topics, and my own doctoral dissertation. And I homeschooled myself, because the stuff that I taught you people at the beach, I had to learn it to teach it to you. So you know, if I was going to do art and music review, I had to get how to get Helen Gardner's history, and I had to read it, you know. But my formal education, because my PhD in religion, you know, this guy who's writing a book on Charlie put me together with some former president of Loyola, and the guy in this Italian restaurant around the corner came and he opened and said to me, this Jesuit priest, he said, you know, I spoke to Father Mitchell, the chair of the religion department at Portland. He said, you've got a very soft PhD. So you know, it could have meant 50 different things. You know, it could have meant, which I think this meant, because this guy was a real retrograde, that I was kind of post-Vatican II and he was pre-Vatican II. Or it could have meant it was a lazy PhD. and
Hello, John.
hello, Anne Marie.
Oh,
Here's
thanks.
Pat's big sister.
Good to see you.
Welcome, sit down.
Hello, everybody.
This is Anne Marie Dolan, for those of you that go back that far. In the very, okay, none of that now. Sit down. You can't come in and
I don't believe I actually got John to stop talking. First time ever.
So this Father Mitchell says, you got a soft PhD. So I said to this priest, I said, would you do me a favor, and would you go back to Father Mitchell and tell him that he can't imagine how soft my PhD is. that what he sees as the softness is the tip of the iceberg. This was not a soft PhD. This was a liquid PhD. And this Jesuit thesis, he was trying to attack the importance of Brooklyn Prep in my life. And his thesis was that I didn't catch fire until I got to a real, he was attacking Jesuit education, which is, to me, sacrilege, because I wear Brooklyn Prep sweatshirts. So he said, well, you see, you're proving my point. You didn't really catch fire until you got to Harvard. And I said, oh no, Father. I said, if my PhD was soft, I said, I didn't learn anything about this. So where did you learn? I said, Brooklyn Prep and debate. Brooklyn Prep and debate. So anyway, back to Molly Garrity, and then I'm almost done. So I said to her, look, I want to do my education right this time. But I won't leave these high school kids out. So what I'll do is, will you please accept me for 3 years from you? And we just won't take any freshmen. And when the last of them graduates, then I would come. And I remember what she said. I called her every year until she died 2 years ago to thank her, because this changed my life. She said, now I understand what you wrote about girls. And you're the first person accepted from West 1975. So, of course, we then went through those last years together, with gradually fewer and fewer people in the band. When I got to Harvard in 1975, Lisa was in my class. If you want later, I don't want to talk too much now. And some of you have some questions you want to ask, which you're probably entitled to ask. So it took me about 2 months to go from telling Lisa that I would write to her over the summer to the day we were there. So it was dramatic. And the rest is pretty orthodox. I mean, we did law school in 4 years, not 3, because Lisa was hating it. And in fact, she refused. At the end of our first year of law school, she said that she would never set foot on the Harvard Law School campus again. And she said, you just register for me for the classes that you take, and take good notes. And she arranged to have her exams taken across the street in the hotel. And she never did set foot on the Harvard campus again, and she graduated. So she got high grades in some of the courses that I did. Although I did very well in law school, very well. And when we graduated in 1979, she worked at the White House for a couple of years, and I worked for judges first at the Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court. And Harvey did me a second favor as I was leaving, which was to offer me a position on the faculty. We didn't want to live in Boston. We were hoping to live in New York. But that kind of opened up everything. And I fell in love with, actually, I wish she were here today. And Susan Stabile, who was in that last group and was on the Nationals team. We should nod in the direction of Pat were the very first. Right? Pat Fenimore and Pat Sarah were the very first nationalists, 2 persons.
We were eliminated.
Right. Pat, but then
Mary Ellen?
right. But Joanne and Winnie were the first team to win the nationals, and Joanne has the trophy downstairs. And then, of course, we then start the biblical chain of command because we won that 2 years in a row, because then Winnie and Regina won it the next year. And each of I can tell you, today is meaningful to me because as I said when I started, everybody at NYU knows that if somebody comes in and says, I was one of John's debaters, whatever meeting I'm in, wherever I am, whatever the person wants, it happens. And some of you have experienced that, I know. Mary Ann had one of the more memorable visits because she wandered by the law school and remembered vaguely that I was the dean and came up to my office. This was my first year as dean in 1988-89. Came up to my office, and sure enough, outside of my main office in a kind of large ante-room, there were about 20 people sitting, just like in the old days. So Mary Ann sat down with them, expecting me to come out and do something on slides or music or whatever. And about 15 minutes in, began to pick up on some of the conversation that this was a sit-in.
And others, like Lillian, got as far as the desk and didn't think to mention to the guard that she was the same friend as which always, ends up in kind of the greatest
Hey, my daughter graduated.
and kind of walked away. But anyway, I got to NYU in 1981 because Susan Stabile called me when I was clerking for the Chief Justice and said, this place really is like the society. And I was named dean in 1988 and did a lot to make it like the society, frankly. I mean, it's a law school where if you ask the students, in fact, somebody did this. They went around and asked the students, summarize the school in one word. And 7 of the 8 students the person asked said either community or family, which is very unusual for a law school. But it was a law school where I knew 2/3 of the students' names and would say hello to them in the hall and made that the expectation of teachers and so on. This president thing just last to fill you in on that, and then I think we should stop for a while because I talk much too much. We'll just let you talk for a while, and then we'll start going around, just starting. Nobody has to speak, but just we want to give an entry, it might be funny. So I they came to me to be, in 1997, January 97, I'll tell you this story. Again, this is to stay in the family. I was down in Washington, and Lisa and I had spent 3 summers, I think, in the early 80s, 83, 84, 85, 86. 4 couples would spend about 10 days together, read the same books. And we were 1 of 4, and many of them young. And of my senior administrators, 3/4 of them, almost all of them under 50. So I've got a good team to lead to the next person. Essentially what I view myself as doing is coaching the team. Somewhere between 6 and 10 years old, and I think I will teach. I will teach here at NYU, and I will recreate Brooklyn Front. The last thing that I will do will be to create a high school, not a religious high school, but one that looks a lot like Brooklyn Prep, in which probably every student will be required to debate. I'm very serious about this. I will get the funding for it. I talked to Joel Klein. He would give me a school if I wanted to do it in the public school system. I'm not sure if I wanted to. He says if I do a charter school, then I'm free of it, but I don't trust that. Although I do want it to be a school for kids who people have given up, who people don't think have promise. In other words, I don't want it to be another version of the school that Katie goes to trailer. And I've begun to put my team in place for that. I think I've recruited the headmaster for it. I'll probably start work on that even while I'm still president. Then it will either be in Brooklyn or it will be somewhere in the ambit of NYU because I can get a lot of synergistic play out of voluntary faculty time and use of facilities that I've been the U.S. president of areas. So that'll be the last. Sometime over the next 5 years.
You need a home out of it?
Any of you that wants to be involved. I'm serious about
You need
that.
to retire social studies?
So let's stop and let you people talk and everything. But I don't trust that. Although I do want it to be a school for kids who people have given up, who people don't think have promise. In other words, I don't want it to be another version of the school that Katie goes to trailer. And I've begun to put my team in place for that. I think I've recruited the headmaster for it. I'll probably start work on that even while I'm still president. Then it will either be in Brooklyn or it will be somewhere in the ambit of NYU, because I can get a lot of synergistic play out of voluntary faculty time and use of facilities that I'm going to do as president emeritus. So that'll be the last question. Sometime over the next 5 years.
You need a home on it?
Any of you who wants to be involved. I'm serious about
You need
that.
to retire some
So let's stop and let you people talk and everything. And you think of the stuff.
We weren't gonna go anywhere, we were so
You
happy.
think of the stuff we did and how lucky we are.
To be honest. Do you remember that time on the way to Albany?
Listen,
Do you remember the time on the way to Albany?
Okay, so-
Your sister,
Kathy Fitzgerald and Rosemary Roll. Notice the way the teams come in. So Lillian has just said, so this is true. The scariest moment we ever had on a trip, we had now graduated to station wagons. Because what you people don't realize was that I had to produce the money to support the trips. And to pay for the meals when we went to the Chinese restaurants. Or to pay, no. Or to pay, so I had the money from my beach chair business.
Louis Peters.
And with Louis Peters.
Louis, yeah.
And then we started running dances.
The lobster quadrant.
And then that's Gene's got it. So then that didn't work.
Veterans on farm wars, I recall, or something.
Pete Seeger.
Brothers
Because Pete Seeger. Let me give this to you, because so Pete Seeger had been blackballed in the business. And we were up at Tanglewood, and I was a big Pete Seeger fan. And the Weavers, I used to try to
Oh, yes.
And we went over, we were up there for the concerts, and I saw that Pete Seeger was performing up at Tanglewood, and we went over. And it was I was in tears because I had brought whatever group of you was at Tanglewood together with Pete Seeger in a live performance. And I'd never done this in my life before or since. I went backstage just to say to Seeger how much it meant to me to have you people see him. And he was meeting with a group of Quakers about his boat, the Stillwater, and clean up the Hudson. And they said, how can we contact you? And he said, just write me in Beacon, New York. And I went home, I wrote him a handwritten letter about you people, saying what we were doing, and saying I put on these concerts now, because the concerts were designed to make money. The Clancy Brothers, the Chad Mitchell Trio, the Brothers Four. So I wrote Seeger and I said, it would be a dream come true for me if I could put on a concert, but I can't pay you a lot. And his wife Tashi wrote back and said, Pete was very moved with your story about the girls. He will give you a benefit concert. So I'm down at St. Francis College one day. And see, 2/3 of you weren't involved in this. So that's what I'm telling you, kind of shares the part. And 1/3 of you weren't. But you probably viewed through the eyes of a high school student. You can't get the full. So I get a call from now, Sister Dolorosa had turned it over. It was some
Catherine
witch.
Alonso.
The witch.
The guidance
She was, and she tried to do away with the society. She was an enemy.
Yes,
She was a real enemy.
You made me sit next to her.
She was a real witch. I blocked her name now. And she turned it over to this wonderful woman, Sister Frances Marguerite, who was the huge, the huge one. And I want you to know something, just a quick footnote on Frances. Frances Marguerite and I remained friends. And she blessed Lisa. And she was at our law school graduation. And you want to hear it, the ones, especially lawyers. Frances Marguerite tells this great story because she would lead the nuns. There was a whole group of the Josephite nuns to this day are interested in John because they saw me kind of grow up. So Frances Marguerite tells this wonderful story about how she, because I brought it down to the Supreme Court when I was clerking, and I had her meet Chief Justice Berger. And I gave her a tour of the court. And she sat down with us at dinner that night, and she said, you know, she said, I never realized this is what you would do. She said, we had dinner at the convent a month ago, and the nuns were asking after you. And she had been at our law school graduation. She knew that I had gone off to Washington to clerk at the Court of Appeals in the Supreme Court. And she said, I looked at them and I said, sisters, I can't explain it. All that talent, all that education, and he's going to be a clerk. Now I realize it wasn't what I was thinking. And Frances, this is one of the eeriest things, because I think it was, see, one of you was talking to me about Ed Brophy. Was it you?
Me.
Who was it?
Me.
Franny. Ed Brophy.
Before it reaches over to pour stuff into her coffee. This is none of the old school, and she pours it in, and we're watching her pour maple syrup into it instead of cream. And she goes to like this, and she realizes what she's done. And instead of saying, oh gosh, look what I did, she wasn't going to admit she did anything wrong. She drank it.
Was it her on one of the trips where a state trooper stopped you and pulled you over because you were going 90 miles an hour? There was another trip and we was on the thruway, and I don't remember, I think it was Dolorosa with us this time, and the trooper said to Dolorosa, you better watch this guy. He's going very fast. He'd give you a ticket, but it was, that flat tire was scary.
So then we went from the station wagons to the vans, and we had the 15-passenger vans, which we ended with. But we were always on the verge, and that was the pressure on me as an entrepreneur. That's what started the tutoring business. We started when I went commercial with the tutoring business, and that was when we could start flying places. And we began to go to California to the Stanford tournament because nobody got paid in the tutoring business. I don't know if you realize that, but none of all my friends like Naylor and Lee Huebner and Larry Tribe, they all donated their teaching time to that, and we worked, and the tutoring business is what got us to the West Coast, and I think once we even went to Hawaii, if I remember.
Yeah.
Did we go to Hawaii?
To Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've sung this song, but I'll sing it again, of the place that I lived on the wild windy plain in the month of April, the county called Gray. Here's what all of the people there say: so long, been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. The dusty old dust is getting my home, and I gotta be drifting along. The dust storm came and it came like thunder, dusted us over, it covered us under, blocked out the traffic, it blocked out the sun, and straight for home all the people did run. Singing so long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. The dusty old dust is getting my home, and I gotta be drifting along. The sweethearts, they sat in the dark and they sparked. They hugged and they kissed in that dusty old dark. They sighed, they cried, they hugged and they kissed. But instead of marriage, they were talking like this: honey, so long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, been good to know you. The dusty old dust is getting my home, his call. He said, kind friends, this may be the end. You got your last chance at salvation of sin. Well, the churches were jammed, the churches were packed. The dusty old dust storm, it blew so black. The preacher could not read a word of his text. He folded his specs, took up collection sets,